What's up, YouTube, and welcome to the next video in my Collecting Goals series. Today's video is all about a subset I just completed for the Sega Genesis, and it's a rather obscure one. My favorite video game developer and publisher, if you've watched my videos, you know, is Taito, and I decided to collect all the Taito games for the Sega Genesis complete in the box. At first, that really doesn't sound like a very challenging subset to complete, considering they only made 11 games for the system. However, a lot of the games that Taito released for the system had very low distribution, and I believe most of them were sold to video stores. So if you want to find these games in really good condition, you are going to have to do a lot of hunting. Sega Genesis is an unusual system in that it's much easier to find cases and artwork for games than it is to find the manuals. So for most of these games, tracking down the actual instruction manuals was the hardest part. I always like to give a little context in these videos of some of the reasons of why maybe these games didn't sell so well, and I really struggled to find a lot of Taito advertising from the era. So over here is a ad in a GamePro magazine from around 1992-1993 advertising the game GROWL, and that is one of the better games for the Sega Genesis in this subset. However, that is one of the very few Taito ads that were full page for their games for the Sega Genesis. Most of their ads were more like this one, in that they featured multiple different games. So this is an ad that has Chase HQ2 and Hit the Ice for the Genesis, but it also has some Super Nintendo games in there like Sonic Blastman. So you could kind of tell they didn't have a huge advertising budget. The other thing I thought was kind of odd was their slogan that they were using during this time, which was, "Catch the Taito Wave." I don't really get it. I guess it was a just totally tubular way of advertising their games. So a few of the Genesis games came with these posters, which featured really just the Genesis titles. There weren't a whole lot of them. Like I said, there was only 11 in the subset, but I am going to go over each of those and kind of show you some of the box art and what makes these games unique. I do think they look really good all lined up on a shelf together because they have pretty different multicolored spines on the boxes. Most of the games in the subset are highly playable, which is another benefit of going for this oddball subset. So the first game I'm going to show you is Kadash, and this is not a console exclusive. It was originally a Taito arcade game, which was ported to a few different systems, including the Genesis, as well as the TurboGrafx 16, and the Japanese PC Engine, of course, and the Mega Drive. This one kind of has the typical Taito box artwork in that there's pretty small screenshots on the back, a very bright color which kind of clashes with the text, and very hard to read text would be the other thing about this game. So if I was looking at this game on the shelf, I wouldn't necessarily think that this was something that really caught my attention at the time, most likely. The box artwork on the front's pretty good for this game. It's really just a copy of the arcade flyer, I believe. So this game is considered not the best way to play this game. The TurboGrafx version that Working Designs published is actually considered a little bit better, but still a good game if you want to play an interesting arcade fantasy-style side-scroller game. With a few action RPG elements, I should add. The next one I'm going to show you is Chase HQ2, which was, of course, yet another Taito arcade game originally. This one is kind of cool because it has a lot of different period cars that a lot of kids would have been into. I think this box art actually comes off pretty well, and the game is actually somewhat fun, albeit a lot like the other Chase HQ releases. However, this one has an even stranger back art in that there are no screenshots whatsoever. So it comes off as kind of lazy. Again, you have kind of the packed text on there, and then you have a couple of the game sprites for like the Ferrari F40 and things like that, which kind of livens it up a little bit. So this one is not incredibly hard to find, I would say, compared to most of these, but it's also not really super desirable either. So the next one I'm going to show you was actually the hardest one for me to find complete of any of these games, and that was, again, just due to the manual being extremely difficult to track down. So this is the Flintstones, and it is much like the other Flintstones games that Taito released at the time for the NES and the Super Nintendo. This one is not as rare as Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, however, I do think this one has future potential to go up in price, because really nice copies of this complete are pretty difficult to track down. Game is much like the other Flintstones games in that it's really just not that hot. I I'm not really sure what the whole backstory on how Taito got involved with Hanna-Barbera Productions was, but they released games like Flintstones and Jetsons and things like that for other systems. So definitely not a console exclusive in the sense that it's a Flintstones game by Taito, but this one has its own, it doesn't have a subtitle like some of the other ones, so I think it kind of has some pieces of all the other ones' gameplay. It's decent. Most of those Flintstones games are okay, but not something you have to track down as far as gameplay-wise. But very difficult game to find complete. Another game that I've always really enjoyed that has really spiked in price lately is this game, and that is GROWL. This is a very interesting arcade beat-em-up that was ported to the Genesis, and that you are a rescue worker type thing who's trying to beat up animal poachers in Africa or some such. The really interesting thing about this game is that because, of course, the gorillas and elephants don't want to be poached, they will help you and fight alongside you at certain times. It's very creative. It definitely stands alone. But if you flip the box over, you can kind of see again why this game didn't really sell that well. So again, you have a ton of really tiny text that's packed in there. It's very hard to read. Some very blurry screenshots of the game that don't at all sell the game. Like, they're just very poor choices of screenshots. But this game is a lot of fun, and I would say this is one of my all-time favorites that they did for the Genesis. You really need to track this game down is the best thing I could recommend. It's just a lot of fun, and it's very unique. And especially if you like beat-em-ups, it's definitely a lot different than just the typical side-scroller through the ghetto that was very prevalent at the time. So the next one I'm going to show you is Hit the Ice. This one I can't explain at all, really. Taito had a huge hard-on for Hit the Ice, and I don't know why. It wasn't a game that they originally developed. It was a game by Williams Entertainment, better known for pinball releases, really. And it was an arcade game, but then they were the ones that handled the home ports. They ported this game to just about everything. There was a Game Boy version, a TurboGrafx 16 version, a Genesis version, a Super Nintendo version. There was a planned NES version, but it got canceled. So really, this one doesn't stand out as anything special because it's yet another game that this got, or yet another system this got ported to. If you like cartoonish, over-the-top hockey, I guess this might be fun, but I never really was, knew the arcade game even at the time, so it doesn't mean much to me. So on the back, again, just some kind of trademarks of their art style they had going. Very, very tiny screenshots, a lot of crammed text on there, and colorful, but at the same time, not really a great way to sell the game. I do like the cover art on it, but I'm not really sure if that was, from the Arcade Williams release or if that was actually something they made themselves. It's worth noting that Taito of America was kind of on their way out whenever these games were being released. Taito is still very much in business, even though they're now a subsidiary of Square Enix. But at the time, they had a Taito of America that was primarily responsible for bringing these releases over. Taito of America closed in about 1995, so ever since then, it's been very touch and go as far as a huge variety of publishers that bring over their stuff, or were until Square bought them out. So, a little bit of the backstory there. Sorry, I just kind of threw that in the middle of the video, but it just came to me. Next, I want to show you Rasten Saga 2. This was a well-known character that was a Taito arcade, original game. Rasten Saga 2, I think, was home exclusive. I don't think this was an arcade game, and it really shows because the game is not nearly as fun as the first Rasten game, and actually the third Rasten game is way better than this as well. So this one has very cool artwork on it, I will say that. I like the character. I generally like the style of these games, but this one, just the gameplay is very disappointing, unfortunately. Again, you've got a huge parade of text on there. You've got some poor quality screenshots that don't really sell the game, and probably yet another reason why this one didn't sell all that hot either. This one is a little bit easier to get for some reason, complete than some of these other ones, so just thought I'd call that out. The next one is a very cool game, and I think this would have sold better if they would have stuck with the actual subtitle or real title of this game. So this is Sagayam, but this is actually better known as Darius 2. I think if they would have stuck with that Darius name that people knew from the arcades, this game probably could have done better. But regardless, this has great cover art on it. It's a little bit dark, but it does have a lot of detail to it. I think it really stands out on the shelf. A lot of fun. The one thing I will say about this game is in the home port, the bullets are very, very small in this game, like much smaller than your average Genesis shooter. But it is a lot of fun to play because most of the games in the Darius series are, and I'm a pretty big fan of it. Again, small white text, multicolored background, small screenshots. So they definitely had a consistent aesthetic of most of these game releases. But that one is another one that is getting very expensive and also very difficult to find complete. Most copies that you're going to find were former rentals, and they're pretty beat to hell. This next game is another kind of oddball one. This was, I think, a little bit later release because the box art deviates a little bit on this one. This is stsword, and it's actually really hard to see, excuse me, the game title on this one. It's buried at the bottom of it, but you have this very busy fantasy art going on in the cover. It's actually kind of cool, you know, when you take a look at it. But this game is really strange also. It's you know, like a fantasy side scroller. It doesn't play great. It almost feels like Roston Saga 2 in a way, but it definitely has some things going for it just with the character art and things like that. Box art on this one actually is much better on the back, albeit again very busy. So that's why I think this one might have been, I don't know, slightly different person that developed or that created the box art. But you know, it does still have very hard to read white text. Like, I can't even really tell what's going on there, even looking at it up close. So, another interesting release. I would say of this whole stack, this one is in the best condition of any of them. This is in, like new condition. I got this from a friend, and I really wish some of the rarer titles in the stack were in the shape that that one is, because that one really stands out to me. All right. Release number 9 is Space Invaders 91, and this is highly underrated. I really, really like this game. I think just people think it's just another Space Invaders, but it's really Space Invaders enhanced a lot for the time. Much like Galaga 88 was a thorough remix of Galaga. So this one brings a lot of new things to the table. It brings much faster gameplay than classic Space Invaders. And there's a ton of levels in this. I couldn't even tell you how many. I've played it for a long time, and I don't think I was near the end. So there's a lot on offer here. The only thing I wish is maybe if it offered like 2-player function or something like that, that could have been a little bit different. But as far as a 1-player game, it's a lot of fun. Really like the box art on this one too. Again, just, you know, a lot going on, very detailed. Interesting concept art, I guess. I'd like to see like a poster of this. I think I would hang that up for sure. So, can definitely recommend that game. It doesn't go for a ton either, and definitely an enjoyable game. So next up is Thunder Fox, and this was basically Taito's answer to Contra. Definitely not as quality as Contra, but it has its charms, I will say. It's, you know, very much the same style. I'm trying to remember the character. Oh yes, I do remember the character names. They're not really that creative. So the game's name is Thunder Fox, and your characters are Thunder and Fox, which is very action movie of the time, I guess. This one, the box art, again, is extremely minimal on the back. I think this is one of the earlier Taito published games. Most of the games in the stack were released within a very short period of time, too. I should mention that. I think, you know, even though the Genesis lived from like 89 to 96 or thereabouts, most of the games in the stack were released between like 91 and 93. So Taito didn't really stick with the Genesis for a super long time. This one's pretty fun. You know, like I say, it's not going to cost you a ton. I think it's worth checking out. And the last official Taito published game for the system is Ultimate Kicks. And much like Space Invaders 91, it's a super enhanced version of the classic arcade game Kicks. Really like the artwork on this one too. I think it stands out, and wish this game had done a little bit better. It's very much like the other box art on the back, but a lot of fun. You know, if you've ever played the arcade classic Kicks, this one brings a lot of new things to the table. Again, much faster gameplay than the original game, and some good level variety, a lot of cool backgrounds and stuff like that going on. So definitely can recommend that too. All right, so you would think the subset is done, and that is all I'm going to show you, but there are a couple asterisks. So these are all the games that Taito of America actually published for the system. However, there were 2 other Taito developed games for the Sega Genesis that Taito of America did not publish. So I'm going to show you those also. So the first one of these generally comes as a surprise because it's a very common sports game that Sega themselves published for the system, and that's James Buster Douglas Knockout Boxing. Buster Douglas had like his 15 minutes of fame. I think he was the one that knocked out Mike Tyson or something like that, and then like nobody ever heard from him ever again. But he got a video game in his honor. However, this game was not developed intended for him whatsoever. This is actually a Taito Japanese release called Final Blow, and it was an arcade game also. And you can even see in the small print there that this is licensed by Taito Corporation. So Sega, for some reason, decided to partner with Taito on this game. I don't know the whole story on that. They inserted the Buster Douglas license and probably changed a couple of the texts of who the characters are and whatnot, but ultimately, this is a Taito game, and guess what? It's not very good. So I will actually say that. Maybe that's why Taito of America passed on publishing Final Blow in the US. The last one I'm going to show you is also a little bit of a stretch. So this is Insector X, which is a great shooter also. A company named Sage's Creation published this game in the US, but this originally was a Taito arcade game. And I believe the Mega Drive port of this that Sage's Creation licensed was ported by Hot B, which is another kind of obscure developer. But ultimately, again, this is originally a Taito game, and you can see Taito Corporation 1989 on the back of the game. So I think that is truly all of the Taito-related releases that made it out to the US. There are quite a few Taito Mega Drive games that we never got, so maybe that'll be like one of the next things I chase down. But hopefully you enjoyed this view into a very obscure subset. I'm sure I'm probably one of the only people that was actively tracking something like this down based on just being a huge Taito fanatic. So thank you for watching. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think. And I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.